This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Starting the show is David Schemm, State Executive Director of the Kansas Farm Service Agency, as he highlights the multiple conservation reserve programs and what emergency plans they have in place. K-State Beef Systems Specialist Jaymelynn Farney keeps the show going as she discusses the cow camp in eastern Kansas and what hands-on learning will take place for the attendees. Part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast ends the show as Brad White, Bob Larson, and Todd Gunderson chat about calf care right after birth when it comes to vaccines and implants. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Wednesday show with an update from the Kansas Farm Service Agency. And in with that update, we have State Executive Director of the Kansas Farm Service Agency, David Schemm. David, thanks for joining us today.
And not a problem, Shelby.
And David, today focused to begin with towards the Conservation Reserve Program, and what are some different categories within that program?
So absolutely, Shelby. So, always like to give you kind of an update from our various divisions. And our division, our Conservation and Price Support Division, covers Conservation Reserve Program area, also some emergency conservation programs. Again, a lot of these programs that are focused around the conservation, as the name would say there. But yeah, CRP, just an update for everybody on CRP and what's going on there right now. Hopefully everybody heard about the continuous CRP sign up and general CRP sign up there. So those openings to enroll or submit acres into those programs for acceptance for continuous started back in February 12th and actually closed out here in March 20th. So all of those people that were wanting to sign up for continuous programs, again, a little bit more long-term, a 10 to 15-year enrollment time there, and as they kind of work through that. So that sign-up period there happened there. General CRP opened up back on March 9th. We still have a few weeks for it to run here till April 17th is the close for the general CRP. And I know that's definitely a lot more acres for producers that signed up and interested in that. That's generally about a 10-year program, but again, it can vary just a little bit there. Shelby, just for a quick reference for everybody, continuous sign-up, Kansas has about 64, almost 65,000 acres in continuous CRP, and we have a little over 70,000 acres in general sign-up or general CRP sign-up there. So just to give everybody a little bit of a background here, those people that are interested in putting their acres, either re-signing it up there, or if it's a new enrollment, new acreage or fields that they want to sign up, we take all those applications. Many of those producers are aware of it as they go through those applications, what areas they want to sign up or what conservation focuses they want to sign up for that ground there, whether it's native grass restoration or whatever. We have a long list there, but we take all of those and we assign a certain target number on them, and those go up to the national office. Again, CRP is held by a cap. 27 million acres right now is the cap for CRP acres. And, expiring acres, there's room within that cap for all the expiring acres to be able to re-enroll new acres. There is a little bit of room, but again, people can also choose not to enroll as well, obviously, if they have expiring acres as well there. But the national office compiles all those offers there, see where they're at compared to a cap, and then basically they send notices back out to states to let producers know if they've been accepted into the enrollment that they have signed up for, whether it's continuous or general. So just a little bit of a look on that backside, quote to say, Shelby, what happens for producers there as they go through that process there of signing up there. We're hoping here early April, honestly, here to have kind of an idea of the offers that were accepted and or rejected, specifically for the continuous where, it has closed out there. So, generally it takes just a couple of weeks for us to determine, or national office to determine if they're going to, what acres they can accept and not.
How will producers hear about if they did get their acres accepted?
So, yeah, absolutely. Once the county offices receives the notification from the national office, they will reach out to the producers via email, phone call, however it is. Let those producers know status of their CRP offer there, and if they were accepted or not rejected into that program there, and then we'll go from there. If they were accepted into it, the requirements that they'll need to be doing to make sure that they do enrollment with it, and then that it gets the grass or whatever target conservation is done.
And while we're talking about CRP, can't forget grassland CRP, and where's that one at?
Well, again, a very popular and growing popularity is our grassland CRP. Right now we have almost 136,000 acres already signed up for grassland CRP. That's a really program. It's almost a little bit more what we would call that working lands CRP, opportunity for producers to continue to graze, if they submit a grazing plan and for it to be accepted, but definitely a very growing popular program there. No announcement has been made yet as far as a sign up yet. We are anticipating a sign up to be announced. Obviously, when that sign up period does get announced, we'll reach out, let producers know, give them the opportunity to sign up there. Again, all of this CRP does have to work underneath that national CRP cap there. In Kansas, we are setting at over 2 million acres right now of CRP, which is fifth in the nation there. So obviously, CRP with annual payments of amounting over $76 million going out each year to producers is obviously a big conservation impact on our state, both from the conservation side of it, but also from the financial side of it.
As we're talking about agriculture, I've already heard some mentions of maybe drought this summer. And so is there a emergency program for people who do have their acres enrolled in CRP, but maybe also need to use them?
No, absolutely. That's one of the provisions there with CRP, and even in disaster situations, is that we can authorize emergency haying and grazing of CRP. Again, some parameters that have to be followed by. So if we get into drought, and let's hope we don't this summer here, there's a certain minimum time at a drought level that we have to be in for the state. D3 to D4 generally is where the kind of trigger points are for CRP. But once we hit a certain amount of time in those, what happens is producers can go into the county and they can apply to either hay or graze some of their CRP acres, depending upon the amount of time that they have been in drought there. And that is without any type of reduction in payment. Obviously, at any time that a producer felt like they need to for a reduction of payment, they could go out there, graze and or hay their CRP. Again, the best thing to do is to reach out to that county office on their specific situations, because there can be limitations on how often they can hay or how often they can graze a certain piece. So again, some of this is specific to the field, obviously to the producer as well. That's why I always say it's good to go in and talk to your county office there. But Shelby, one of the things I would be remiss in not mentioning as well is the aspect that with the wildfire, the administrator has also opened up emergency haying and grazing to producers affected by the wildfires. And actually that's statewide, so that the producers can access that CRP anywhere within the state to be able to put their cattle out on it, especially displaced cattle, or if those producers were affected and not able to pasture that burned ground yet there. So that is definitely an option that the deputy administrator has allowed us to have right now for that. The one caveat I would say on that there, and I know with where we're at right now, it would be very limited, but we were trying to make sure that when it was authorized here about a month ago, that we cannot allow haying or grazing during the primary nesting season. And that obviously starts very shortly here in April here. So again, we do know that it does reduce that amount of time they can, but once the primary nesting season is over, these waivers can still apply specifically for those producers that have been affected by the wildfire, but as well for the producers that are affected by drought Hopefully it doesn't occur, but if it does, they can still have that option available for when that drought does after the primary nesting season.
And what other program is available when we're thinking about these wildfires?
Well, we have several programs that are available, but specifically within our conservation and price support division, I think the big one, and it's one, Shelby, that we definitely get a lot of question on, is our ECP, or Emergency Conservation Program. The big one that this obviously covers for those producers out there is fencing. It's for fencing that has been destroyed or damaged by this wildfire there. And I shouldn't say it's just fencing either, Shelby, because the emergency conservation program also helps to address waters that were lost because of wildfire. If it was solar or whatever, but gives cost share to those producers affected, both from the fencing and the water there. There's some determination a producer can take whether or not he needs to fully replace a fence or if it's just repairing a fence there. Again, having a little bit discussion with the county office is going to help for the particulars on that there. But that's something here, Shelby, just this last week, had the opportunity to meet with some producers in Meade, Kansas, that one have been affected by the wildfire, but also other producers that just concerned about wildfires in their areas there. And that's one of the things, programs we definitely brought up with, is the ECP program and the aid for specifically fencing on there. Listened to a lot of great concerns or points that they had, Shelby. It was a very good meeting.
David, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, Shelby. Always good to visit with you.
That was State Executive Director of the Kansas Farm Service Agency, David Schemm. As always, you can find out more information by visiting your local service center or by going online to Farmers.gov. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show by talking about cow camp happening in 2026. And then to talk about this event, we're joined by K-State Beef Systems Specialist, Jaymelynn Farney. Jaymelynn, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on the program, Shelby.
Jaymelynn, last year cow camp was in its first year, however, now in its second year with two different cow camps, and the first one taking place in eastern Kansas, May 5th through the 6th. And before we dive through the details and what will be in the programming, what is cow camp?
It's a hands-on program focusing on building practical skills, confidence, and connections for women looking to enhance their knowledge of the beef cattle enterprise.
And is this event really focused towards women in the industry?
It really is. We've kind of taken the perspective of women instructors. It's for women, regardless of your skill set. If you're just looking into wanting to get into the cattle system, or your husband or significant other has done all of the cattle management, now you want to learn those skills, to somebody who's been in the industry for multiple years, but you've never done it all. I know I have been in the cattle industry for a long time, and I learn something new all the time too. This program hopefully will cover the breadth of all of those activities, or all of those knowledge levels for our women producers. And as I said, it's mainly taught by women, so we can help you with some of the deals that we have adapted to match our smaller hands or our shorter statures or things like that.
And wanting to talk through a few of those topics, and starting off for nutrition for cow-calf herds, and what will you be covering in that topic?
So we're going to kind of teach you some of the basics, how to sample your tests or sample your forages, your pastures, and that gives you your building blocks to go visit with the experts to be able to help you with determining your stocking rates, setting up a nutrition program for your animals, setting up rations. So we're wanting to give you those building blocks. So we're going to teach you about the basics of nutrition, and the participants are actually going to go out and pasture sample hay bales, learn how to safely sample things like silage and processed feeds. We want to make sure we provide you those basic skills. And then once you get them collected, now how do we go have a intelligent conversation with somebody to help you be able to be successful in your operation.
And another good tie-in when we're thinking about nutrition for cattle, stocking rates. And how are you going to cover that topic?
So we're actually going to do some simulated programs, essentially, for our stocking rates. We're going to provide some tools, and the participants are actually going to get to go home with a grazing stick. And we're going to teach you how to use it to measure forage height and estimate the amount of forage availability, talk about consumption and how that goes into your stocking rates. So you're actually going to go out, measure some grass, we're going to have some cows, and you get to do the math to be able to determine a stocking rate.
What are a few other topics that you'll be covering?
EPDs, and that's one of those expected progeny differences. It's more or less going to be kind of a how to use the correct selection tools for your production systems. And yeah, we're going to, talk to you about what are the basics, where to find things, because each breed has their own different names for different EPDs. But then we're going to take it a step further and actually give you scenarios. You've got this list of bulls. Which ones are going to meet this operational objective? So we're actually going to put you in real world scenarios for how to use those tools.
Will there also be an opportunity to learn some maybe more about cattle handling or have a first-time grasp on some low-stress handling options?
Yes, we will have some. We've got an instructor who will talk to you about low-stress cattle handling in pasture, and also, a little bit of some demonstrations about different facility types, and really highlighting and emphasizing safe for the animal and safe for the person type of managerial practices.
And what else will be being covered at Cow Camp?
We can't bypass the health component. And we're actually bringing in an animal health and behaviorist from the University of Arkansas to come and talk about how to develop a herd health plan with your veterinarian, because they know what are the issues within your area and can help you with that. Develop a good partnership with your veterinarians for that. But she's also coming and will help lead a hands-on activity with some of her graduate students about helping you learn about injection sites, determining the proper tools for those injection sites. And you will get to do some simulated injections on different animals to be able to try out all these different pieces of equipment so you can learn which ones might work for you or not. We'll also have some tabletop demonstrations about putting in implants. We're actually going to have some simulated ears for folks to get to practice doing that. Animal identification. They'll get to try a whole bunch of different ear tag systems. We actually even have a battery-operated ear tagger for those who may not have as much hand strength as we used to have, and talk about what is the importance of record keeping, which is important for individual records, herd records, and how to be able to use those within your operation.
And what is another cool hands-on activity that participants will get to engage with?
We have about a day and a half worth of activities. Well, half a day is going to be 100% hands-on. You're going to be doing things. We're going to practice tail bleeding. So we'll actually teach you how to do tail bleeding. And I'm so excited about this because we're actually going to let the participants, if they so choose, freeze brand some live cows out there. And, freeze branding, at least to me, I don't handle the smoke from a hot fire brand very well. And growing up in New Mexico, where we actually would drag calves to the fire, I've seen too many guys get accidentally branded with the hot brand as those calves are thrashing. The freeze branding is just such a cool concept and something for folks to be able to try. We're going to have a body condition scoring session and let you learn how to look for it and what is the importance of body condition scoring within your operation. And another good take home that you'll get to do we're going to have you build a vaccine gun cooler. And it's the way to be able to have proper vaccine handling. That's one of the biggest downfalls, or one of the biggest knocks that most operations get. So we're going to help you make a vaccine cooler that you get to take home. A few other little topics will be just a quick introduction to some advanced reproductive strategies. And then, of course, another session about practical records and how to use your practical records, especially when it comes to culling decisions and other components from that perspective.
Jaymelynn, when and where is this taking place?
The first one that'll be held in 2026 is going to be on the eastern location, and it'll be in Parsons, Kansas at the Southeast Research and Extension Center, and it will be May 5th and 6th. With this, yes, that is Cinco de Mayo, we will provide lunch and dinner on the 5th. But once again, the dates are May 5th through the 6th at Parsons, Kansas at the Southeast Research and Extension Center.
If people are wanting to find out more information, including hotel information and getting registered, where can they find that?
Because this is such a hands-on program, we are capping the number of registrants at 35 people. We're not going to shut it down where, if you're number 36 or 37, that you don't get to apply. Because if somebody drops out, we're going to keep rolling through. We would like to have, a solid 35 people in the event. But you can register and find out our hotel information simply if you just put into your search engine of preference Cow Camp Parsons 2026, or it's found on the wkrec.org events Cow Camp. So that's the Western Kansas Research and Extension Center website. And the hotel information, especially for those who are interested in coming, please hurry and register. And if you need a hotel accommodation, we do have 2 hotel blocks there, but their block rates expire April 4th for our Holiday Inn Express and April 10th for the Quality Inn. So I strongly recommend you try and take advantage of that block rate, because otherwise it is a pretty substantial jump in price for our hotel accommodations. The cost to attend the meeting is $75 per registrant.
Jaymelynn, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you. And if you need more information, I said you can just find a Cow Camp, or you can contact me directly at jkj@ksu.edu.
That was K-State Beef Systems Specialist Jaymelynn Farney. I will link the Cow Camp information in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our show with part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast with Brad White, Bob Larson, and Todd Gunderson.
What's your opinion on implanting and or vaccinating a day-old calf?
This is one that's interesting. When I was taught immunology and vaccinology, that a young neonate is not a particularly good candidate for vaccines. And some of the data would support that. And then there's actually some research that I've seen over the years that, again, kind of that an implant at birth, a growth implant, isn't all that beneficial. You start really seeing some benefits if you delay that first implant, if you're going to use a suckling calf implant, more like at 2 months of age or so. There's not a lot of vaccines I'm really anxious to get into a newborn calf, and I'd probably delay the implant until they're a little bit older. The reason that people do like that is I'm handling the calf, or at least I have the opportunity to, depending on the attitude of the dam. But in general, I prefer to delay some of those activities until the calf's a little bit older.
Todd?
How much time have we got, Brad? I have gone the rounds so many different ways that you can vaccinate calves at birth, with intranasals versus clostridial vaccines given in the brisket versus even giving some oral vaccines at birth. And I do believe that they can mount an immune response to some of those vaccines. It doesn't always show up in the form of antibodies. It's hard to measure antibody levels. One of the things that make cattle maybe a little different than humans as far as vaccines go is the passive transfer dynamics. And if we have a calf that's getting colostrum, which is probably the most important thing immunologically you can do for a calf, is make sure they get high-quality colostrum and get lots of it and get it early. But how that colostrum interferes with that vaccine is a major component of this whole equation. Taking a step back from that, that's looking down at the cellular level. Can we get an immune response to these vaccines at birth, yes or no? I would say the answer is probably yes. Maybe doesn't always show up in the form of a humoral response. Maybe sometimes the only thing we get is a more robust cellular immunity, which means that when we give another vaccine 2 months later, maybe they respond better to that follow-up vaccine.
There's some specific pathogen dependency and some route of administration dependencies that are embedded in that. So it's a complex, nuanced answer to
that's right.
Yes or no.
That's right. And you could get into all kinds of rabbit holes here. Let me take a step back and go up a little bit higher view on this problem. Why am I giving vaccines to calves at birth? What is prompting me to feel like I need to give all of these vaccines to this calf on day one? And the answer almost invariably is because I have a lot of calfhood disease, because I have a lot of calves getting scours, or I have a lot of calves getting respiratory disease when they shouldn't be. And that is a systems problem, not a vaccine problem. And if I feel like I am giving too many vaccines or if I feel the need to give a lot of vaccines at birth, I think I need to take a step back and look at the overall system and say, what is it about the way I'm calving these animals out that is creating the dynamics for disease transmission and for disease development? Because what I might be doing with that vaccine is actually just creating a fix that backfires, if I can use that systems terminology. We apply some fix in the short term to try and alleviate a pain point that we are feeling, and all that really does is it enables us to continue living in the cycle of transmission and disease that got us here in the first place. We kick the can down the road, and when the pendulum swings back, it's worse than it was when we began. So that's a very short answer to a long, complex problem that takes, honestly, a lot of discussion with your veterinarian, a lot of thinking about the way that animals are processed, the way that they move through your system, and thinking about the way that disease is actually transmitted between animals. Those all have to be part of the discussion. It's not an answer that I can give that applies to everyone. It's going to be an individualized, tailored response. But short answer, yes, you can give vaccines to calves at birth. Some of those vaccines might even do something immunologically. From a system standpoint, I almost always feel like you're going to be creating a quick fix that doesn't address the underlying problem, and that's where you should focus your energy.
That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.